Hello, everyone. I'm Shannon Bream, along with Rosanna Scotto, Harold Ford Jr., Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Okay, President Trump ripping Biden's handlers as we get shocking new revelations on the decline of the former president, including some details about those in his inner circle and how they shielded a frail president from scrutiny. And President Trump coming in hot on this growing scandal, posting this, quote, Joe Biden was not for open borders. He never talked about open borders where criminals of all kinds, shapes, and sizes can flow into our country at will. It was the people that knew he was cognitively impaired and that took over the auto pen. They stole the presidency of the United States and put us in great danger. This is treason at the highest level, end quote. And now, one of the authors behind this new bombshell book is speaking out about a staged Biden town hall that was so bad, his campaign couldn't even use it.
This fake town hall was in order to film it so they could make it into campaign commercials. They filmed it in Delaware with supporters. But Joe Biden, at this point, this is the spring of 2024, Joe Biden's town hall, which was closed to press, was so bad that campaign officials determined that it was not usable for a campaign commercial. Some people say this was because Joe Biden was incoherent. He could not really articulate his thoughts. Some people just said, like, the lighting was bad. That was sort of the 2 points of view.
And if that wasn't shocking enough, Jake Tapper claims Hunter Biden was basically acting like the chief of staff.
Hunter was driving the decision-making for the family in a way that he was almost like a chief of staff. I think he is provably, demonstrably unethical, sleazy, and prone to horrible decisions. I mean,
tell me how you really feel.
Well, I mean, just look at the record. I mean, after his brother died, he cheated on his wife with his brother's widow and then got her addicted to crack.
Well, it wasn't just Hunter in charge. As one Biden insider put it, quote, 5 people were running the country, and Joe Biden was at best a senior member of the board. Okay, Jesse, I want to start off here. I've gotten through a lot of the book, but not all of it. But there's kind of this theme where people were so afraid about President Trump becoming president again that they were willing to kind of look the other way on this Biden stuff. But it ended up being a self-fulfilling prophecy because propping him up to the last minute gave them President Trump again.
For maybe 3 terms in a row, Shannon. I don't think that's a conspiracy. I'm going to vote again and again and again. So he couldn't get through a fake town hall and he couldn't get through debate prep, but they sent him out anyway and he got slaughtered. Permission to make an analogy?
Let's hear it.
This is like a quarterback who can't even make it through practice. Can't even make it through 7-on-7, Harold, non-contact. He's turning the ball over. He's forgetting the plays. He's limping around. And what do? They sent him out on Sunday and he gets knocked unconscious on the first drive. Then what happens? You got to send in the backup, Kamala Harris. Now, why don't they have a better backup? Well, because the GM never drafted a quarterback or never signed anybody in free agency to compete for the starting job. So what do you do in the offseason? You fire the GM. Who's the GM? Jill. That's who is calling the shots, Jill and his son Hunter. So the woman the president was sleeping with is running the country, and then his son, who's recovering from a crack addiction, is running the country, and he's filming a documentary during the whole thing. I cannot wait to see it. So Jake, this is where he's fake. He comes out now and he says Hunter Biden is a sleazy criminal with too much access to his pop. That's what I said. And when I said it, he called me cruel and a conspiracy theorist. So let me get this straight. The people who were wrong about Biden get book deals. What do the people who were right about Biden get? What do we get? I know. I want an apology. And I want a written apology because I want to frame it and I want to put it on my wall. Greg knows I don't collect art, I collect apologies.
That is true.
So this is what they're saying they're doing the cover-up. All the people closest to Joe Biden were duped. The anchors who interviewed him in person, the politicians who met with him, the reporters who traveled with him on the plane were all duped. But the millions of Americans who were watching him on TV from their couches, they knew that he was shot? No. Everybody knew. They're just pretending to find out now with this book as an excuse while they cash in.
Well, and Harold, the book talks about a lot of people who have regrets that they didn't say something before, probably because they ended with this disaster in the election in the fall, but they had knowledge, and 200 plus people have talked to them now. It's a question now that a lot of people that are running for 2028, Democrats, are going to have to answer, and they're starting to be asked, what did you know and when? I mean, that's going to be part of the vetting process for them moving forward.
Good to be with you. Glad you're here. I'd say a couple things. First, the story's not getting any better. A lot of this Jesse said very well, and Greg will say when he speaks, remind us as well as he should.
Thank you.
That there are many around this table who were saying these things for a while. It does strike me as a bit incredulous, if not insulting, to hear people whom are covering this now to say that they had these kind of opinions but weren't saying this during the campaign. They have every right to say that, but they should not be so sanctimonious about it. I don't know when we stop. I know that I don't know when we stop talking about it. I know there's a U.S. senator who wants to do an investigation into the White House on this. I don't know what we are trying to get at, and if we're trying to get at something noble, I'm willing to say we should do it. But the president former president will have to live with this. Those around him will have to live with this. Even his cabinet member who said that 5 people were running the country. Why didn't they come forward? I mean, I think the question for me will be more so, why didn't they all come forward if they believed that he was not fit to be president, or they just believe that was he jealous, or that person jealous, he or she, that they were not in that room? Or were they saying it because they thought that the president couldn't run the country? But at some point, we should realize the American people recognize this. They rejected him and Kamala Harris and put back into the White House the person whom he beat 4 years earlier. So that's where I stand on it.
Well, and the book goes back to describe that there were people who were concerned as far back as 2015 that the loss of Beau was really debilitating to him. So, Greg, that begs the question, if they were concerned about him all those years ago, was the idea just to get him elected in 24 and then do the switcheroo with the vice president? Did they really think he could go another 4 years?
I don't know. I don't want an apology. I want money. I want 10%. I want 10% of Jake's book.
10% for the little guy.
Yeah, 10% to the. Very good. But you know what else I want?
What? The little guy.
I want the town hall tape. Right? Let's release the town
You're not
hall
getting
tape.
that.
Don't treat it like a Pamela Anderson sex tape where I got to spend days looking for it. Somebody's got it. I want it. And then maybe we'll discuss reparations. We need Biden reparations.
Yes.
Reparations that Greg likes.
Exactly. Finally.
We found some.
I can't help but think that all this went to hell when Hunter quit doing crack. Things were great when he was on drugs, and then he stopped. Everything just fell apart. The truth is, the people actually running the country are guilty of identity theft. Every day for 4 years, these imposters took power that they weren't entitled to. You know, and you're right. It's not about these guys. These guys weren't duped. Meanwhile, Biden wasn't even competent enough to sign away his power of attorney. You know, they preferred to keep it that way. It was like they liked him docile, like a drugged sex slave, so they could have their way with the American people. About Hunter Biden, yeah, he's chief of staff. His staff. These journalists had a juicy story, cocaine in the White House, while Hunter is there. How could you not pursue that story? You got drugs, you got power, you got intrigue, you got sex, and yet the reporters didn't stop to put down their lattes. Nothing to see here, let's move on. Hunter, yeah, now you say Hunter's the nexus of power, and there was a cover-up. You were there, you could have uncovered it, but no one, and no one was stopping you from doing that story except you. I think the big confession is this is about personal bias, and people are very, very embarrassed to admit their bias about Trump is what drove this story. And now I'm going to save you, Harold. I'm going to create your presidential campaign. Ooh. I'm going to get you elected. The biggest scandal in Democrat history is this, but it's also the solution to one problem. What is the Democrat Party lacking? They're lacking a lane. They don't have issues, they don't have leaders, but they lack a lane. Okay, so the one person, Harold Ford, who leads the fight to expose the secret 46, you know, the unelected coven that ran the country, will be the candidate. And the reason why is you cannot trust any other candidate because you will never be sure if that person will be president. How can you trust the Democrat Party if they nominate anybody who doesn't come out against this? Obviously, somebody got to them. And the Republicans can always say the same thing about the Democrat candidate. Who are you really getting? Are you sure that's going to be the president? But the Democrat right now who stands up and leads the fight to uncover the secret 46 will win back the Democrat Party's their trust, because you don't have any trust. This is the lane you are looking for, Harold Ford.
And maybe Dean Phillips as your VP pick, since he was one of the only ones out there willing to raise these questions. Rosanna, interesting nugget I saw in the book. Obviously, this was written before we heard about the president's cancer diagnosis, but there's a little tidbit in the book where it talks about the doctor that is treating him was so close to him. There are questions in the book about whether he was too close to objectively treat him in a more aggressive way. Not with respect to this cancer. Clearly, they didn't know anything about that when they're writing the book. But it raises questions about whether so many people so close to him just weren't able to do their jobs objectively.
Well, we're finding out House of Cards is nothing like the House of Biden, with Dr. Jill in the lead and Joe making special appearances. We now find out in this book, right, that she is the most powerful first lady in history, the defender. I don't have contacts in the White House under Joe Biden, but something got my attention. When Joe Biden and Dr. Jill went to Normandy last year, and they were there for the D-Day ceremonies, and Dr. Jill was back and forth on a plane, on a military plane, from Normandy to Wilmington for Hunter's trial, back to Normandy on our tax dollar, even though the Democratic Party said that they were going to repay what they would pay for a commercial flight. Listen, Jill was not just standing by her man, she was standing in for her man.
All right.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.